So what you're looking at is the new MSX Tower of Power here, or Monstrosity. Looks more like a monster in some ways. So yeah, I've got my good old MSX Turbo R, typical slot expander in the back, and today I got my second expander in. Slot expanders are kind of a tricky subject. There's lots of timing issues, lots of stuff that basically it can be hard to find ones that exactly work the way you want them to. Maybe I've just been unlucky, but I've been using this cheap one for years. It's been a great piece of kit. It's always worked. It's actually really simple. Unlike most slot expanders, which tend to use more off-the-shelf parts, all the logic for this one is controlled by one single FPGA inside that cartridge shell there, which means it basically works or it doesn't. I actually did buy a more advanced expander to use in my front slot, but I had lots of issues with it, honestly. I think it had some flaky soldering. But I'm not going to get into that. But anyway, I got my money back, and no harm, no foul. But my hunt was on. The guy that actually made this expander just this year decided to actually make a few more of them. Made a small batch, which you can order by email. So I actually decided to buy a second one. It wasn't really designed to go in a vertical slot, which is why, as you can see, I basically got a block of foam to hold up the cartridges. And I've got foam between each of these cartridges here just to keep it level and not put any stress on any of those connectors. This setup is actually temporary. I've got a few more parts that haven't come in yet that'll make things a little more sturdy. But I just wanted to do a test and see if this would actually work. The short answer is yes, it does. So, the main reason you'd want to do something like this is if you're like me and you're addicted to video game music and you want to build up your sound chip beast. So eventually I'll go into more details eventually when I get everything finished, but just for today's demonstration. So basically we've got the SD interface here, which is essentially my hard drive. All the files run on the SD card. Then we got the audio wave here, which is basically MSX audio, which is the Yamaha Y8950, which is basically OPL and 80 PCM in one chip. Behind that, we have the Dahl Solry R2, which is an OPL4 based cart. Absolutely love it. Which of course is backwards compatible with OPL, OPL2, OPL3. And you're thinking, wait a minute, isn't this OPL? Yeah, but it doesn't do the 80 PCM that this does. So it is useful to have both if you're into that kind of stuff. Then for up here, we've got the bottom card is actually RAM, which is basically in a slot expander. It works as 4 meg, so that's a 4 meg RAM upgrade, which is basically required if you're going to run like Neo Geo music, which uses lots of custom samples. The card in the middle is the Neotron, which is your OPNB, which is mostly used by Neo Geo and a lot of Taito arcade games. And then above that I've got the musical memory mapper, which is actually also a 1 meg upgrade cart, but also contains a Texas Instruments SN7. So I've got kind of a variety going on here. I have more sound carts that I can actually use as well, but I'm actually out of places to plug in all the cables for my mixer. I have two mixers. I have the typical analog one then, and I've got the Yamaha UW500. So between some of these carts have their own audio outputs, some of them will go internally, some of them like the audio wave will do either. Generally you want to use the external because it sounds cleaner, but just for this demonstration I'm going to run it through the MSX internal line. So let's just boot this up. As you can see, I've got over 5 megs because I've got 4 megs, 1 meg, plus the internal RAM, of course, of 256K. So, boots up into DOS. Load up my file manager. Sorry about the noise, but I have the speakers jacked up just so I want to make sure you can actually hear this stuff. Yeah. The MSX itself is noisy, which is why normally you just use the external audio plugs. Alright, so let's go to VGMPLAY. So, I don't know, let's just start with something from my youth. OPL2, Alone in the Dark, Trouble. So as you can see, it's OPL2, YM38112, and it's running on the Dalsary R2. Of course, also, since this is since it's OPL4 and it's also compatible with OPL3, we can run the FM version of Doom. So yeah, we're now running in OPL3 mode. Which, if you're not familiar with the OPL4 FM is literally just OPL3 FM. They are 100% identical. This is actually really nostalgic for me, because growing up, all I had was a Sound Blaster 16 in my 486 PC. So, this is how I heard Doom for many, many years. It wasn't until much later when I had Windows 95 that I actually heard the MIDI version for the first time. Running for the horrible Windows built-in MIDI, but in some ways this is the Doom I remember the most. Okay. So, let's move on. So the next one we got in there is the audio wave. So this is my Y8950. We'll just go to SNK here. And Victory Road's always been my favorite. And here's one that uses the voices, which uses the 80 PCM, as well as the OPL music.
You can't escape me! Come get me if you can!
This is honest. Victory Road honestly has one of the best soundtracks ever of arcade music. It makes really good use of... The music itself is pure OPL. It only uses the 80 PCM for like the voices and sound effects. And for pure OPL, it's really, really well done. Okay, so then moving on to the next cart. Let's go old school and go with the musical memory mapper here, which is the which contains the good old Texas Instruments SN76489. And so I've got some handy 1000 music loaded on here today. And let's go with Zillard. Of course, most people will tell you the original Japanese FM versions are far superior, but there's nothing wrong with some Tandy 1000. Yeah, each of these carts kind of have their own output level. Some can be adjusted, some can't. So I basically have two mixers tied together right now, and I need to come up with... I just need a big giant mixer, really. Keep hoping I can find one cheap in my local hard-off, but they always just have tons of XLR mic inputs, which I don't need. Yeah. The SN7 to me is a very underrated chip. When used correctly, it's quite enjoyable. Of course, you can also mix chips together, like, just as a simple example. Everybody hates this version, but the PC version of Castlevania At least the Tandy version. I mean, the OPL2 version is awful, but I actually kind of like the Tandy version, which actually uses a DAC. So as you can see, it's actually using the musical memory mapper for the SN7, but it's also using the MSX's internal PSG to replace the Kovacs style DAC that the Tandy 1000 version used. Haven't actually adjusted the volume, so the mix isn't right, but of course, if you've seen any of my old videos, you've seen that I've mixed cartridges together, like mixing OPL2 and MSX audio for Chopper 1, using two Neotrons to have dual OPN for like .ES1. Alright, but anyway, the last card we have installed to test today is the OPNB. And let's go Neo Geo and let's go some Metal Slug 5. Not the best game, basically unfinished, but it does have some cool music. And this can actually show you what's going on, because as you can see all the little lights here. The blue light, currently what it's doing is it's unpacking the compressed file from the SD card and loading it into the RAM, which is the bottom slot, which is why the red light's going crazy. This will actually take a while to load because we're talking some huge samples, and we're limited to an 8-bit bus here, so it's not the speediest. So first it's basically loading. You can speed this up if you manually uncompress the files and keep them ready to go, but and now what it's doing is it's finished, so it's found the cart, and now it's actually loading the samples from the RAM into the sample RAM of the sound cartridge itself. There we go. So, one of the weaker games in the series, but I love this track. So, as you can see, the monster works. Of course, I do have other carts that I can use that just aren't hooked up, because one, I'm out of cables. Like, for example, I've got the YM2151 OPM cartridge. Or, of course, being an MSX, we have Konami SCC. Also, a few more fancier ones like the Darky, which is dual PSG. And, of course, the Play Sonic, which contains a Sega VDP, so it can actually use dual SN7, as well as, more importantly, a Commodore 64 SID chip for playing those music. But there is a limit, though, and that limit comes to power. Out of curiosity, I had this plugged in earlier, and it did work, but there were a few times where I lost audio sync, and I think just because, yeah, this especially is a pretty power-hungry cart, because it's not just for playback, it's for making music as well. You can plug a keyboard into it, such as the YK01 I have down here. Especially also the Play Sonic is an absolute power hog. So, future-wise, as I said, the setup's not done. I plan to get some external power going, as well as some adapter cables, so I don't have to have a foam stack like this. But I'm just pleased to see that so far, this mess basically just works. Of course, also there's the OPLL and the normal PSG, which is in the, as well as PCM, which is in the MSX Turbo R itself. So yeah, basically today I just got in the new expander and I just wanted to give it a quick test, and test successful. So, see you next time.